I mentioned earlier that President Trump had written his letter to Congress and to the Senate. And I will, as I say, I'll get it up on our website. I'll put it in the comments on this page. If you're watching the show today on YouTube, I don't know how to get it to you, but go to my website, AmericaCanWeTalk.org. If you're watching on Facebook, I'll put it up. The President Trump is one of the main things people love about him is he defends himself. This impeachment is an outrage. But I'll tell you three more quick things going on today in this impeachment cluster. One, Rudy Giuliani is on fire. I mentioned yesterday he's back from a trip to the Ukraine, and his comments, he is out there in the Twitterverse and other places talking about what he uncovered. He said, he talked about how President Trump and the phone call that he had with Zelensky in July that caused this whole impeachment. Trump was simply asking new Ukrainian President Zelensky in a July call to investigate crime at the highest levels of both Kiev and Washington. So he's saying, and he has come back with oodles, mountains of evidence of the astonishing, just interlaced like snakes level of corruption going on between the leaders in Ukraine and people in Washington. And I think a lot of what's happening now is people in Washington realizing they really don't want this whole, kettle of snakes open. They do not want to have the discussion start. They're trying to keep it all inside and crushed. And so they don't want to have what Rudy Giuliani has brought back. But where this turns now, assuming that the House does vote for impeachment tomorrow, and it goes over to the Senate, there's a great speculation of what exactly is going to happen inside the Senate. Because on the one hand, Senator Lindsey Graham has a petition going around the Senate. 50 people have signed, 50 members, 50 senators have signed saying that they will vote no in this impeachment trial in the Senate. They are promising they're going to vote no. So basically saying, if 50 people are going to vote no, therefore the Senate is never going to get to the 2/3 majority needed of voting yes to impeach the president, because the Constitution requires 2/3 in the Senate trial. So Lindsey Graham's trying to say, hey, I already got 50 votes. We're going no reason for a trial. Let's just get it over here. Slam dunk, move on. I have to share with you, though, something that I came across today to help you understand why, even if that happened the very first day in the new year, and the first day the Senate took up the impeachment trial of President Trump, that wouldn't end things. And that is this. The Democrats on the House side are committed to continue pursuing impeachment regardless of how the Senate votes. You have to let that sink in. They're saying there's no reason you cannot impeach and impeach and impeach and impeach. They're saying they will do it over and over and over and over. They're saying that because they decided, to be clear, they decided to rush to judgment, and serious commentators are pointing out, you're going to impeach a president on nothing? On this record with no witnesses? All these witnesses they couldn't call. Now, some witnesses they couldn't call because the executive branch, President Trump, asserted executive privilege. Those are still being held up in court. Those, you have to get to a court decision to what particular people and documents executive privilege applies. But the House members could have decided, okay, since they have executive privilege and there is actually such a thing, we, House Democrats, are going to wait and see what the courts do. And then we can find out who we can have testify, and we'll have a full hearing, a full impeachment. But they couldn't wait. They can't stand the idea of waiting. And they also knew that the longer and the closer it got to the re-election, the campaign, the election in 2020, that more and more people would say, why don't you just knock it off? Why do you have to even do this? We have an election in 2020. Let the people decide. They were bound and determined to get an impeachment vote before Christmas. And so they were willing to take nothing for evidence and move toward impeachment. So the vote is tomorrow. A lot of speculation that it won't stop the Democrats, even if the Senate holds their vote like Lindsey Graham wants, that there will be a, just the next impeachment hearing in the House and the next impeachment hearing. The only thing that will stop that is eventually having the House go back to Republican majority rule, which, as you know, for all of 2020, it'll still be under Democrat majority rule. And so they can do this on and on and on. Second thing being talked about a lot in Washington. In fact, I do political analysis for various news sources. And this morning I did a station in Houston, and the question they were asking was essentially, is President Trump taking a risk going to the Senate? Or is he unwise in assuming that the Senate will not vote to convict? There actually is argument out there that there are some Republicans in the Senate who would welcome a full trial and who are very amenable to the idea of having a full trial, having all the witnesses, and then voting yes to convict President Trump and remove him. They're worrying, some commentators are worrying, that President Trump is walking into a trap in the Senate. That even though we have a slim Republican majority, so it shouldn't be possible for the yes on impeachment vote to get to 2/3 of senators, there are people worrying it could if there's a long trial and many other witnesses brought forth. I'm just going to say a couple things about that. Number one, there are two things that elected officials care about: members of the Congress, U.S. House, and members of the Senate. Now, I don't mean that they don't believe in certain things. They might believe in the Republican platform or the Democrat platform. They might really be strong on border security, or they may be strong globalists if they're on the left. But ultimately, two things drive politicians. One is the desire for re-election, and the second is the need for money. If the Republicans in the Senate have their eyes half open, they are seeing the polling for President Trump in support, his own party, 95% of Republicans or something like that support President Trump. These people can watch television. They can watch these big Trump rallies. They see not just that people come, but that there are thousands and thousands of ardent and strong supporters for President Trump. A Republican member of the Senate does not want to vote against that base. They don't want to do it. They don't want to take a risk. Now, third, I will say, and the other pressure is that there are people in Washington, even on the GOP side of the aisle, who dislike President Trump. Romney is one of them. Never reliable. Always Romney, if he has a chance to stab President Trump in the back, he'll do it over and over and over. He is barely Republican, and he is on a mission to destroy President Trump. You have two other Republican members of the Senate who are not just about President Trump, but generally speaking in life, unreliable, just kind of erratic. You never know what they're going to do. One is Susan Collins of Maine, and the other is Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. They are forever. They kind of thrive on being unpredictable and unreliable, and everyone has to worry with a Republican mission. What will these people do because they're so unreliable? So those three are the ones who have not signed on to Senator Graham's petition. But I'll get to my point about them and kind of wrap up this segment to say this. I think many Republicans in Washington have found it hard to work with President Trump because he is an untraditional politician, because he doesn't play their game, because he doesn't get marching orders from the ruling cabal of the Republican Party and do whatever they want. He doesn't do that. President Trump does the agenda he promised the people he would do. He's done it pretty much without the Congress, pretty much without help from the GOP in Washington. Small handful of people actually stand up for him, but pretty much he's done it without any help at all. But there are Republicans, and I will tell you, I've had very high-level people in Washington tell me it's really hard for some Republicans to work with President Trump. They want to feel that security that they're working with somebody in the cabal, in the inside ruling elite, and they feel a little bit unsure about President Trump because he doesn't seem to understand the ruling elite mindset. He actually does what he says he would do and what he believes in. So there is some element of the Republican Party, even in the Senate, and not just those three I mentioned. There's some element of the Republican Party who would think if they had no political consequence themselves, if they weren't going to get hurt electorally, and it was not going to hurt their fundraising, my guess is they'd be happy to find a dignified, allegedly justifiable way to vote for impeachment. Which, to wrap up this segment, points to this. It could not be more important at this time for patriots in this country, people who support the Trump agenda, people who agree with his America First mission, his restoring America's greatness, making America great again, keeping America great. People who understand that and agree with that mission, and I count myself in that mission. I think what President Trump is doing is literally restoring America back on track to be America. You people, and everyone you know who thinks like you need to be on the phone, on the email, calling the offices of these senators, calling your senator, your 2 senators in the states that you're in, calling your members of Congress, calling people in the Senate, putting statements out there in public. Be as public as you can with the message to the GOP in the Senate: don't you dare impeach this president. Don't you dare.